This never happened before this Prime Minister. Does he take ownership for the divisions he's caused and the violence that has resulted? Yeah.
We are back to question period today, where Trudeau's entire cabinet only wanted to talk about the security clearance that Pierre Poilievre refuses to get, while the Conservatives dismantled the Liberals on almost every policy they've implemented.
Let's take a look.
Minister Stephen Harper only 80 days to get a softwood lumber deal that put an end to the tariffs and reimbursed what we're already collected. And then this Liberal Prime Minister capitulated, allowed Trump to reimpose the tariffs and Biden to double them. Harper got us an exemption to Buy America. This Prime Minister then capitulated, allowed Trump and Biden to reimpose them, hurting our construction workers and our providers of steel. Why can't we have a carbon tax election so that we can have a Prime Minister that no longer capitulates to the Americans, but instead will stand up for Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Okay. So this was the first question in English that Pierre ended up asking, and as most of you probably know at this point, this is essentially the repeat of what he says in French. So that's why we start in English, if anyone's wondering. Now, this is an interesting opening salvo from Pierre, considering the election today, because one of the things that the Liberals have insinuated, and if Donald Trump ends up winning the elections, you will hear this on blast for months on end, is that Pierre Poilievre is basically just like Donald Trump. Now, the one thing that Pierre has talked about as well, but not to a extensive degree, but you're going to hear that more and more, is how just because it may be Donald Trump as president, that doesn't mean that he's just going to, you know, link arms and be buddy-buddy with him and do everything that he says.
No, it's going to be work. I mean, you have two completely separate countries with two completely different leaders that are going to have to work together in a symbiotic relationship.
Right. And we need a very strong leader that's going to look out for Canada's interests against somebody like Donald Trump. Because, you know, let's be honest, between Donald Trump and Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, there's very different personalities when you're dealing with these people. So.
Well, and Donald Trump's job is going to be to look out for American interests, right?
Right.
Just like Pierre's job when he becomes prime minister is to look out for Canadian interests. So they have to kind of work together to create, you know, mutual treaties and this relationship so that both countries can thrive together.
Well, and this is the thing, right? There's, you know, I've been involved in many negotiations, and there's a saying that we have when negotiating. A fair negotiation usually results when both sides are unhappy. So, because that usually means that both sides had to give up a lot in order to actually make the deal work, which usually means that it's been fair. So if Pierre is able to act in the best interest of Canada, and Trump acts in the best interest of the United States, and, you know, there's some give and take, odds are it's going to be a relatively fair deal. But this is the problem, because Trudeau, he likes to talk tough after, you know, people leave the room. And that was one of the criticisms that he actually had thrown at him from Donald Trump. While they were in the room, Trudeau was all nice and, you know, smiling and, oh yeah, we'll work together. And then once Donald Trump had left, Trudeau goes on TV and says, oh, Canadians won't be pushed around. I'm not going to be pushed around. And Trump's like, what?
You know, it almost makes me wonder if Justin Trudeau is just so... I don't even know the right word, but if he thinks that Donald Trump is not watching what he's saying on TV, like, it's just ridiculous.
Right. And it's just another way that he ticks off foreign leaders. It's not just everybody out in Asia that's ticked with him. It's the United States as well.
Or Europe.
Mr. Speaker, since I just answered that question in French, allow me instead to take a moment to condemn unequivocally the violence we've seen in South Asian communities across the country over the past few nights. Let me be very, very clear. The individuals who are inciting violence and division and hatred in no way represent either the Sikh community or the Hindu community in Canada. At a time of Diwali, Bandi Chor Divas, we're seeing communities come together to celebrate their diversity and their strength. We will continue to stand for the unity of Canadians.
Except when they oppose your political party, right?
Right.
And you're talking about condemning these individuals. Well, guess what? You're the one who's brought them over here during your last 10 years. That's been the result of your immigration policy.
Well, and we didn't have, or at least I didn't know of, these different groups of individuals like warring with each other like this on Canadian soil. Like this didn't happen under Harper.
Right. This is a relatively new phenomenon. Did it happen before? Sure. But it wasn't to this degree where you heard about it literally every day.
Well, and it makes you wonder, is it because it's to this degree, or is it because that's what the media is focusing on? I think that's an important question that we need to ask, because as we know, the media will misrepresent or overrepresent or underrepresent certain problems. And, you know, as someone who consumes media, I honestly don't know anymore. Is it this bad? Is the media making it this bad? Is it worse and the media is not reporting on it enough? No idea.
Well, and even Trudeau doesn't seem to know what's going on, because he's saying, oh, well, you know, these people committing these violent acts don't represent the Hindu community. Well, it was
Aren't
the Hindu...
they the victims?
Yes, it was a Hindu temple that was actually, you know, attacked. So, but this is what he does. He tries to make it seem like, well, I'm everybody's friend. I'm everybody's friend. Yeah. No matter who is the actual perpetrator of what's going on. It's frankly, it's disgusting seeing somebody this spineless in a position of authority in this country. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. You stand up and you condemn it. But this is what he's going to do. This is a setup, folks, for what happens next. Just watch.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The New York Times 10 years ago. Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class. Median income in Canada appears to have surpassed median income in the United States. Oh, what a decade can do. Now, American workers make almost $20,000 more than their Canadian counterparts. They get twice as much investment every single year. The gap between our per capita GDP and that of the United States is now the worst in a century after this Prime Minister's rising taxes, bureaucracy, and blocking of energy projects. I know why Harris and Trump want to create jobs for Americans, but why does this Prime Minister want to help them?
And that's a great question, because the jobs that are not being created in Canada are most likely going to our neighbors to the south.
Well, we have such a brain drain here because the Liberals are taxing everyone. Like, because they can't control their spending, they'll just say, they just approach this like, well, we'll just get it from the commoners. We'll just tax all of them. And the people that are actually, you know, in these professional positions, yeah, we'll just tax them to hell and back as well. To the point where they're saying, you know what, screw it. I'm leaving.
Well, and especially when it comes to medicine. Again, you guys know that one of my best friends is a nurse, and she lives in a border city, and was saying that some of her colleagues at work were looking at going and working in Buffalo because they were giving the new nurses in Buffalo like a $20,000 US signing bonus. So, like, that is a lot of money. Why wouldn't you want to go work in the US as a nurse if that's what you could make? Like, that's insane.
That's almost 2/3 of minimum wage for 1 year in Canada.
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous.
Mr. Speaker, the silence of the Conservative leader is deafening when it comes to what's happening in the South Asian communities right now. And it's a real shame. Not only is he not stepping forward to talk about how all Canadians must stand together and all South Asian Canadians, Sikh, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, are celebrating together this weekend, but he even refuses to take the issue seriously enough to get the security clearance necessary to be briefed on threats to Canada and to Canadians. That's not leadership, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Okay, so while I don't agree with what Trudeau said, this was a good setup. in terms of the political play here.
It's kind of gross, though, that he's using the memory of the victims to like be like, oh, but it's Pierre's fault for not getting that security clearance.
Oh, 100%.
Like, it's really gross.
100%. But in just terms of political play, this was a good setup. Now, that relies on the fact that Pierre is inept and isn't going to be able to respond to this. But the other thing to take into account is, okay, so you are now blaming Pierre for not getting the security clearance. So to actually do anything against this violence, meanwhile, he's the leader of the opposition, so he literally cannot do anything against, this violence. That would be, whose job? Oh yeah, your job. Your job. So you've actually let this violence happen. You almost let a terrorist act actually happen in Toronto
back in the summer.
Because you gave a known terrorist a citizenship. Like, it's the gaslighting here and the finger pointing is on another level.
Now you know his real agenda. He wants to distract from all the economic misery he's called at home. And so he uses divisions here at home. These divisions are the result of him. Under his leadership, we've seen a 251% increase in hate crimes, fire bombings of synagogues, bullets shot at Jewish children's schools, 100 churches burned and vandalized, and now we see sectarian riots on the streets of Brampton. This never happened before this Prime Minister. Does he take ownership for the divisions he's caused and the violence that has resulted?
And you could see Pierre starting to get riled up because he started to move back and forth, right? And this is somebody who pays attention to what is going on in Canada. That's why he had those stats right at his hip, because he knows them. He knows what's going on in this country because he's going to need to know what he has to fix when he takes over for Justin Trudeau.
Well, and I was just kind of thinking, there's two ways to deal with crime, and the one end, which Trudeau is not doing, is the punishment side, right? After the crime has happened, you put the people in jail who are responsible for the crime. But the other side, he's also not doing, which is the prevention side. Justin Trudeau creates such division in this country that people feel it's appropriate to behave in this manner.
Well, I think the reason is because they know that they're not going to be punished for it and there's no repercussions.
Right. I mean, again, there's two ways to deal with crime, before and after, and Trudeau is failing on both fronts.
And funny enough, this is exactly why countries like China operate in Canada in terms of foreign interference without impunity for the exact same reasons. And that's been laid out in a CSIS report. So you have local criminals being allowed to do whatever the heck they want, and then you have international countries coming in and doing whatever they want in Canada because they can do so unimpeded. It's disgraceful.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, people watching that last answer will know and note the assuredness with which the Leader of the Opposition declared all the causes and the sources of the terrible violence we're seeing, when the reality is he refuses to take the necessary briefings that our security agencies are offering him to understand the threats to Canada. Why won't he get the security clearance necessary to protect Canadians?
And you refuse to give him that information. You are the Prime Minister. You could tell whoever you want and it not be a crime. You could declassify that information. Like, you could declassify it for Pierre. You could declassify it for all of this. For all of us, pardon me. So why won't you?
Well, he felt he could declassify it just fine. Last fall when he said, "Oh, India murdered this guy."
And again on Thanksgiving Day.
Right. And it was like, what? And he was criticized for that, but he said, "No, I have the right to do it." Okay.
Yeah, you might have the right to do it, but that doesn't make it right. Or conversely, you have the right to do that. Why won't you also give Pierre Poilievre or Canadians the information about these 11 MPs? I mean, we had to hear it from a journalist. And again, we're very thankful to Sam that he did all this incredible hard work and got those 4 names for Canadians. But rightfully, it should be coming from our Prime Minister.
Well, and this is the thing. And he's trying to now equate, well, you know, he needs to get the briefing so he understands the threats to Canadians, so he can actually help save their lives, especially when it, you know, deals with, you know, attacks on a Hindu temple. Dude, he literally can do nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. Even if he had the legislative ability to do so, the fact that you're giving him this briefing and the conditions within that briefing prohibit him from acting on any piece of information he's given in that briefing, he can literally do nothing. So this is just gaslighting to the nth degree. And for those of you who haven't been paying attention, or you're just joining the conversation when it comes to the security clearance, we'll break it down again. So this security briefing is from the NSICOP committee, and on penalty of jail, you are not allowed to disclose or act on any piece of information that you actually get from this briefing. So if Pierre found, let's just say, one of his MPs was collaborating with China, you know what he could do about that?
Nothing.
Nothing. If Pierre learned that a candidate running in riding B was recently appointed as the nominated candidate and was going to run in the next federal election, you know what Pierre could do about that?
Nothing.
Nothing. On penalty of going to jail. So this is just a whole lot of crap, and it's a whole lot of smokescreen to try to have something to hit Pierre over the head with, to go to Canadians and say, see, this guy, what does he have to hide?
And the narrative online is that he can't get a security clearance, which is completely false because A,
he's had one.
He's the leader of the official opposition, so he has some degree of security clearance already. And B, he's going to be the next prime minister, so he's going to receive the top security clearance.
And he used to have security clearance while he was a member of Harper's cabinet.
Right, and there's different levels of security clearance, but he's got one right now as the official leader of the opposition. I mean, anybody who works in government really has to go and get some sort of clearance. And he's going to get the uppermost level of clearance as soon as he becomes prime minister. So the fact that he can't is just misinformation that the left is putting out to try to trick and scare voters.
The question for Justin Trudeau is, you have all of this information. Why are you doing literally nothing with it? And this is the whole question when you strip everything away. This is the whole question that Canadians have when it comes to the public inquiry on foreign interference. Why have you done literally nothing?
Who here doesn't have a family doctor? Well, 5 million Canadians don't. Now, Loblaws owns Maple, and a family doctor working at Maple's will charge you $80 a month per person to see a doctor. Now, things are gotten so bad, this is predatory. The Prime Minister lets you down, and then Galen Weston swoops in to profit off it. Why is this Prime Minister letting Galen Weston profit off of people's pain?
I have a question for you, Jagmeet. Why are you letting Trudeau do this by not voting non-confidence and calling an election?
Well, because they have to waste their opposition day on an abortion motion.
Right?
Of course.
To try and score some points that they're actually not going to get in terms of the polls, trying to hit the Conservatives over the head with this.
For something that the Conservatives are not interested in right now anyways.
Right. And this is
it's
ridiculous.
a complete waste.
And I have another question for Jagmeet, like, because we looked up this thing that he's talking about.
The Maple Health Clinic, yeah.
So I guess it's an ability for people who don't have a doctor to actually get some questions answered from medical professionals.
Yeah, it's like an online portal from what I can tell. Again, we just kind of looked this up quickly while Singh was talking. But it looks to be an online portal where you can connect virtually with a doctor or nurse practitioner, whoever it is you happen to need. Now, here in Ontario, again, we can only speak to Ontario really because that's where we live. That's what we know. You cannot perform any services that OHIP covers. So, for example, going into a clinic and seeing a physician, they would bill OHIP for that. You cannot pay for that privately. No one is allowed to charge you for that privately. unless, of course, you're not covered by OHIP. So that may be, for example, international students. But you're not allowed to charge for a service that OHIP delivers. So this seems like it's kind of a workaround where I don't think OHIP delivers online clinics. So that's why they're able to do this.
Yeah, it's a bit of a loophole, but on the other end of this, it's an opportunity for doctors to make a little bit extra money, and it allows people that don't have a family doctor to actually, get some questions answered.
Well, and here's the thing. If there was not a need for this service, it would not exist. There's over 6.3 million Canadians who are without a family doctor. I know Jagmeet gave a different statistic, but we had looked this up the other day and it was 6.3 million.
Well, and when has Jagmeet been accurate on anything?
Well, that's true too.
Potatoes and apples.
But the point being is that if you have so many Canadians without a family doctor, of course they need access to medicine. People get sick. People have chronic conditions that they need monitored. If you guys had a family doctor for all those Canadians, this service would not exist. The private sector would not be rubbing its hands together and going, oh, look, a gap in the market. Like, this exists because of a failure within the healthcare system caused by the government.
And the NDP allows this to continue to happen day by day by day because Mr. Jagmeet is on a search for his pension.
Mr. Speaker, more bad news from experts. Last week, economists at National Bank released an analysis that said, quote, GDP per capita has fallen by about 4% cumulatively since 2022, which is unprecedented outside a recession. This is a made in Canada per person per capita GDP recession caused by a government that's hiked taxes on everything: energy, housing, banks, investment, that's driving out investment and making Canadians poorer. When will the government admit its mistake and reverse course on tax hikes that are driving out investment, like they reversed course on so many other issues?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives would like to make comparisons with the United States, I have one for them. Canada ran a deficit of just 1.1% of GDP in 2023, Mr. Speaker. That's compared to a 6.3% of GDP deficit in the United States of America, Mr. Speaker. We have made sure to be responsible with our balance sheet, and we are doing it while supporting vulnerable Canadians, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives' hidden agenda is to cut programs that Canadians rely on.
So now the Liberals want to compare themselves against their Democratic counterparts down in the United States.
But we're not bringing up U.S.-style politics. It's an evil conservative.
Yeah. Well, and let's not talk about the fact that we promised a $38 billion deficit this year, and now we're looking at a $45 billion deficit this year, and we're only 6 months in.
It's a double-edged sword. Like, I love how that has slapped the Liberals in the face, because they took that capital gains Ways and Means motion out of the original budget so that they could vote on it later and try to trap the Conservatives, and now it's come back to bite them in terms of the budget. Unfortunately, it's also come back to bite Canadians in terms of the budget, because whenever the government runs a deficit, we see inflation.
Well, and here's the thing. I've run budgets before, and when I had unexpected cost overruns, guess what I ended up doing? I ended up cutting something else in the budget to account for that overrun. Now, the Liberals keep talking about fiscal responsibility, but all they seem to do is be sitting there and saying, oh, the money debt's going up. Oh, we're spending more. Oh, I guess we'll just continue to watch it. Because fiscal responsibility is actually acting on that and saying, oh, wait, that's not good. All right, guess we have to cut something. What are we going to cut, everybody, in order to remain at that $38 billion? But let's just talk about that. $38 billion in additional deficit spending.
Is that $1,000 per Canadian? I'm not very good with mental math.
It's a lot of money per Canadian.
It's a lot of money per Canadian. So you have to look at it and say, well, that's how they're trying to buy my vote, with that amount of money.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. I mean, how many Canadians have actually had access to these programs that they're talking about? The dental care, I think, is still only for seniors. The pharmacare is not rolled out yet. The national $10 a day daycare is not only failing, but there's no spots. So Canadians, again, are paying all this money to not even be able to see the benefit of these brand new programs that the Liberals are bragging about constantly.
Well, and the other thing to consider is they're saying, well, it's 1.6% of GDP, but it's almost 10% of your entire budget. Like, that's your deficit? Double digits when it comes to budget is not a good thing.
Well, and Canadians are feeling it, right? I mean, I keep getting ads on my Facebook that are saying that 25% of Canadians are having to go to the food bank. That's not supposed to happen.
The government's even paying for ads telling people, hey, you're probably going to have a real hard time paying your mortgage. Maybe you should talk to the bank.
Yeah, we heard them on the radio. Like, what kind of dystopian nightmare are we living in?
The honourable member from Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I'll quote another expert relative to Canada's position with the United States. The governor of the Bank of Canada, who last week said, quote, foreign capital, even some Canadian capital, is going to the United States because they can get faster regulatory approvals, end quote. 2 years ago in Washington, the finance minister in her speech said, quote, Canada must and will show similar generosity in fast-tracking, for example, the energy and mining projects our allies need to heat their homes and to manufacture electric vehicles, end quote. Simple question. Can the government tell us which mining and energy projects they have fast-tracked since the speech in Washington?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that member to be someone who cares about Canada's standing in the world and who I thought cared about Canada's national security as well. But what I find perplexing and what I think must be difficult for him to understand is why is it that the leader of the official opposition is refusing to get a security clearance? Why is it that he would rather ignore the threats to Canada's national security? What is it that he's trying to hide, or what is it that he doesn't want to know? The NCCOP reported that a conservative leadership campaign was under threat by foreign actors. Is that something he doesn't want to know about?
Okay. So I think the answer to Michael Chong's question is zero. Zero projects have been fast-tracked since that speech 2 years ago.
Oh, of course that's the answer, because if it was like, a lot, I don't know what's a lot for a mine, 15, 20, like they would have said that very proudly.
Probably any at this point
Yeah.
for the Liberals. And again, just talking about this security clearance, what does he have to hide? This is the insane thing. Okay, so what does he have to hide by not getting this security clearance? Why will Trudeau not do anything, not release these 11 names in the House of Commons where he's allowed to do, in order to actually inform everybody of what's going on?
Well, one would assume that it's to protect the Liberals. That's the assumption, and Canadians are probably correct in that assumption. I mean, the names that were released, again, and they were kind of unofficial, which is, I think, why a lot of mainstream media is not talking about it, but 3 out of those 4 names were Liberal.
Well, and if you believe Jagmeet Singh, when he was breaking the law, it's actually 4 Liberals, because he revealed to everybody that one of the names was Han Dong. Oops. But
Well, Han Dong's not Liberal anymore, but point being, out of the 5 names that we have been told through various outlets, 4 of them were Liberal. So
there's 6 left. So odds are, if you look at percentages, it'll be another 4 or 5.
But the reason they keep pushing this is because there's nothing that Pierre's done wrong. I mean, he's been able to maintain a 20-point lead for over a year now, and the Liberals have nothing against him. This is the only thing that they can try to use to smear him and say to Canadians, look, do you really want this man to be your next prime minister? Most of us won't fall for it. Most of us know the truth. But there are some folks out there who will fall for this misinformation. And honestly, it's going to be up to all of us to help set the record straight.
And make sure that you are very, very clear on that answer. Why can't Pierre, or why won't Pierre, get the security clearance? Because it would effectively mute him on all things foreign interference. He wouldn't be able to talk about them. He can't do anything about them. And on the off chance that he does learn something from somebody, that there is an issue within his party, If he's heard some similar information from that briefing, he can't do anything.
Right.
But if he doesn't take that briefing and somebody comes and tells him, he can take action immediately. So it's actually allowing him, the agency, to be able to act on any information that comes his way in order to be able to act on it. The real question is for Justin Trudeau. You've known about these 11 names for who knows how long. And you're the one that is telling Pierre, you need to be able to take this briefing in order for you to act on them. The question is, Mr. Trudeau, is why haven't you?